Hello YouTube, this is Morgan, Airspeed Prime here with my next Star Wars video. This is going to be my review for The Mandalorian Season 2 Episode 8, overall Chapter 16, The Rescue. This is the Season 2 finale, and it was a very interesting episode, very exciting, lots of huge, hype moments. But also, along with that, which is really great that it accomplished all that, comes a decent amount of confusion with regards to the fact that they did sort of end the episode kind of right in the middle of everything. And it really only resolved like kind of one or two things. And then left us on an even more confusing note with the sort of post-credits scene announcing this, the book of Boba Fett. And it being very unclear right now if that is a spin-off thing or if that's what Season 3 of The Mandalorian is going to be, or if it's just that is going to have the Mandalorian sort of like airing window next year. Just the confusion around the fandom, I suppose, in the aftermath of this, about the status of Season 3 of The Mandalorian, what this actually is, and just with the timing of it all, I don't think that maybe worked out maybe quite the way they wanted to. It's still exciting. It puts us in this situation where like, oh cool, we're getting something else. But the lack of clarity about like, are we getting more Mandalorian, or is kind of interesting. But let's get into the episode. So we straight away start off with just the sort of, how are they going to actually attack Moff Gideon's cruiser? There has to be a plan to make this work. And it's cool the way they do it. So they hijack an Imperial transport ship that has Dr. Pershing on it. Goes pretty easily with the Slave One, of course, having a lot of tools, including the ion cannon, which disrupts the whole ship. So they do that, no problem. The main focus on scene there is actually the pilot talking to Cara Dune, obviously Imperial Rebel. Very interesting dynamic here as he sort of taunts her over the loss of her planet, and she's sort of taunts him back over the loss of the Death Star. And so it just gets across the idea of like, in the war between the Republic and the Empire, yeah, they both sort of, destroyed, either a planet or planet-sized stations, and lots of people died. And the main point here is just that Cara Dune, kills him. He's holding Pershing hostage and she just shoots him. Accurate shot, and I kind of like that they did the whole like, it almost like blinded Pershing because the blaster bolt went like straight by his eyes. But it was meant to be this sort of like kind of dark moment for her of just like, being so heavily reminded of that she kind of took a little bit of a risk here, but it just shows the scars of the war are still there. So that was a nice scene for Cara Dune. From there we go to find the other Mandalorians. This was kind of interesting in that I don't think we knew for sure that this was going to happen, but it made sense that he knows she sort of has an issue with Moff Gideon. Them helping out would be very helpful. It sort of still begs the question of like, why didn't he potentially go back to the planet where Ahsoka was to try and find her? In that like she has an interest in Grogu as well. But either way, we brought two of the three Mandalorians we met. I don't know where the other one was, but we had Sasha Banks Mandalorian and Bo-Katan. Very interesting scene in that once he mentions Moff Gideon, of course, Bo-Katan is on board. And she specifically points out, as like a setup for later on, that I need to fight him, he's mine, he has a weapon that used to belong to me, the Darksaber, and I need to get that back. So there's the setup that they're going to agree to do this if they can keep the Imperial cruiser after they take it over. So that's the deal. He's going to get more help to get Grogu back. But again, the key scene was actually character dynamic. In this case, the two Mandalorians interacting with Boba Fett, who also walks in. So we had like four, Mandalorian characters here on screen, and all of them having sort of like a different, all a different type of Mandalorian in a way. Din, of course, is the Children of the Watch, Death Watch style, basically cult, this is the way Mandalorian. Bo-Katan and Sasha Banks Mandalorian are more of sort of the standard style Mandalorian, where it's still warrior way, but they're not as, I suppose, strict with their rules. They're more directly linked to Mandalore and wanting the throne and the planet back. In that, I do think in this appearance of Bo-Katan, you saw more of the kind of, the tough aspect of her character, in that, you see a lot of what she's dealing with here, and especially later on once they bring up the whole Darksaber thing. It is interesting, almost the position that she's put in of like, what will she do to get Mandalore back? What will she do to, regain the throne in a way? And, you saw a little bit of a kind of, a different side of her. She's not just the sort of, good character that we've seen before, perhaps. And then, Boba Fett, of course, he confirmed to us that Jango Fett is a foundling, and I suppose because of that, he has been taught at least some of the Mandalorian ways, but Bo-Katan and the other Mandalorian do not acknowledge him as a Mandalorian. And this is a kind of an interesting one, in that she seemingly like acknowledged Din despite being a child of the Watch, in that she was more critical of like, oh, the ones with the strict rules, you're one of them, but she still was like, okay, you are a Mandalorian. But with Boba Fett, she's just like, no. And this fits in line with sort of the general people of Mandalore, how they viewed like Jango, hence the line from the Clone Wars about Jango, him not being a Mandalorian. But he technically was. So my guess is just he has destroyed his reputation by being one of the most famous bounty hunters in the galaxy, and because Boba Fett went down that road, he is treated roughly the same. That's my takeaway from this, and that from her interaction with Din, even though Din is a bounty hunter, he's not like the most like brutal bounty hunter in the galaxy. He doesn't have that level of reputation, but that she can see the potential for him to be good, which is why she's asking for his help. And if in the aftermath she's maybe hoping for his help to take back Mandalore, which is a little bit of a setup potentially for where we could go in Season 3, which I did like that. And rewatching the episode again, I really noticed that scene from much earlier in the episode, that she mentioned that maybe after you've done what you need to do with the child, you'll join us. Which they did ask of him in the last appearance, so that was kind of cool. We got the Sasha Banks Mandalorian and Boba Fett came to blows. He smashed her through the sort of stone table, big hit, and then a little bit of the gadget action, and then she gets her kind of revenge a little bit. Jetpack assisted tornado DDT to Boba Fett. That was really, really cool. Definitely WWE inspired, which I did like. But ultimately, it's like, this is not what we need. We should have shown that level of spine against the Empire. Otherwise, we'd still have the planet. But is this one of the first times where we really get the idea that Mandalore has been, like, completely, like, almost, like, obliterated by the Empire? I suppose this is potentially where, like, we just don't exactly know the state of Mandalore if we go back. Obviously, like, from Rebels and stuff like that, we know that they like, stole, like, all the Beskar. They had, like, basically Imperial super commandos, more or less wearing Mandalorian-esque armor. But him talking about, like, they turned the planet to glass is like, that they, like, purposefully destroy the planet, and it's not just that the planet's in a bad state because of just general war, but that the Empire specifically did something to make the planet like a husk or whatever. So that's kind of an interesting one, in that I think they're really, really teasing at this point. We will at some point in some show, wherever, see Mandalore, and we're going to be maybe surprised at what exactly has happened to it, which probably speaks to maybe the desperation that Bo-Katan seems to have about needing to get that position back to restore Mandalore to some extent. But of course, the final point about this scene is just I like that they reference, that she would be aware after understanding who he is, that he is a clone. And that even though he mentions like Django as his father, she's just point like, no, 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 you're donor. And he seems to take a bit of offense to that, but otherwise seems relatively confident in you know, who he is. It's his armor. It is ultimately official Mandalorian armor. His father was a foundling. You can't really take that back. And it's kind of a little bit surprising that she's very accepting of like Din despite being a bounty hunter, but she seems very standoffish with Boba specifically. But you know, they end up getting on for the rest of the plan, even though Boba Fett, hyperspace is out of the episode once they're in, basically. But yeah, the next stage of the plan is that they do this thing where in the Imperial shuttle, they have the Slave One chase it, and they do like a fake, you know, we're being pursued, we're being attacked, and they crash land into the hangar bay. Boba Fett escapes. They're all inside. So Boba Fett doesn't come in, so we don't get like a Luke Skywalker and Boba Fett scene. That would have been a bit awkward. Given the comedy, borderline comedy nature of how Boba Fett ultimately is defeated and, you know, presumed dead in the Sarlacc by basically Luke bumping into him, it would have been, I think, a little bit much to have that face-off happen now. But anyway, lots of cool action here as we, you know, go from the hangar bay out through the corridors. The plan is that the Mandalorian's kind of going to go off on his own, undercover. He's going to be the one to have to deal with the Dark Troopers before they're allowed out. That's the big sort of threat of the episode, is that basically Gideon and the Dark Troopers are the main thing, and once they don't get super surrounded by Stormtroopers, they should be okay, because everyone here can handle a couple of Stormtroopers, and that's basically what we get. The amount of firepower we have here with Cara Dune, Fennec Shan, 2 Mandalorians plus Din, there's a lot going on here. So some pretty nice action. Din ends up ejecting all of the Dark Troopers out into space except one. So he actually has to have a fight with one of them. And they get across the strength of these droids. They've obviously got very strong armor, but it isn't Beskar like I potentially thought it was. So it just seems like they're just heavily armored in that most blaster fire is not going to take them out. And that's why most weapons were useless, so he has to use the Beskar spear. Again, they really, once again, got across how strong Beskar is. The multiple punches against Din's helmet were kind of really brutal, and I suppose we're thankful that sort of the helmet was already sort of locked up against the side of the ship. Otherwise, that could have been like really bad. But yeah, he ends up spearing it and, you know, realizing the value of that weapon. So that's kind of cool. And he was also warned ahead of time that, like, you know, the Darksaber can cut through anything except pure Beskar, which he's wearing. Plus the spear is also Beskar, so that's pretty cool. The rest of them pretty much just, you know, take the bridge, and it leaves the Mandalorian to eventually go to fight Moff Gideon and also to take Grogu back. A very interesting scene here as we see more of kind of Moff Gideon in action. He initially negotiates with the Mandalorian of like, we don't need to fight, you know, I got what I wanted, I just wanted his blood, let's just do this. And that, like, I assume you want the Darksaber back, and he's kind of like, no, you keep it, I want the child. And that he acknowledges it primarily is Bo-Katan's fight. So the plan is just that apparently Moff Gideon is going to just let him take Grogu back. But when he does, he activates the Darksaber, attacks him, and we get the big fight scene. And I think it's really good. I love the choreography of this. I like that Gideon, they get across, like, he knows how to use the Darksaber. It's not just that, like, he seems like completely unskilled, but he's not like a Jedi with it. And I appreciate that. He's more hack and slash. He's more, you know, utilizing the fact that this is this energy-based weapon that can cut through basically anything, and so quick, fast attacks is the way to go. But they really emphasize the contrast between, like, Gideon handling a lightsaber and then what Luke does later on in the episode. So that was fantastic to see in terms of choreography. And then I really liked the Mandalorian's choreography with the spear, and how they did the whole fight with the fact that he's wearing armor that can block a lightsaber blow in addition to having the spear. So he's blocking some of it with his gauntlets, he can take hits on the shoulder, and then because the spear is like a long weapon where he can actually block a lightsaber on any point on it, you kind of get different styles of choreography than lightsaber versus lightsaber, because even Darth Maul with the double-sided lightsaber, he can't block in the middle, as we saw. But here, Din had, you know, the bit on this end, the bit on that end, and the bit in the middle. So you could have, like, kind of really different and unique choreography in that. There was one really cool scene where, like, he blocked and he had the spear, like, planted into the ground, and then he kicks it out from underneath and, like, kind of rotates it around to do a big attack from the top. All of that was, like, really, really cool to see, just the spear being used as a weapon here very effectively. But what you did see, I suppose, is just the fact that Moff Gideon doesn't have, like, invulnerable armor. He has probably the better weapon, but he doesn't have the armor. So when he gets hit, he realizes, like, he's in trouble. And just, I suppose, the extra firepower that the Mandalorian has, he was able to kind of almost outstrength Moff Gideon and send the Darksaber flying away. So he wins the fight and takes Moff Gideon hostage, which builds us up to the big sequence, which is that he brings Moff Gideon up to the bridge, holding the Darksaber himself. And Bo-Katan is like, what happened? And obviously, like, he had to defend himself. He ended up winning the fight. Like, you can't really blame him for that, and she sort of realizes that that's kind of what's happened. But then Moff Gideon uses this to sort of play them against each other, of like, you know, you're the ruler now, basically, that this weapon you have won in combat from me signifies that you are the sort of rightful leader. You have earned this, it is yours, it belongs to you. You can't just give it to her. He tries to, because he ultimately doesn't, like, care. He just wants Grogu. He has got Grogu back. But the Darksaber doesn't mean anything to him. But Bo-Katan can't accept it, because as much as she maybe thinks that Din is too far into, like, some specific rules of being a Mandalorian, this one she follows completely 100%. She's like, our enemy here is correct. I can't just take this from you. The only way for me to take it from you would be to fight you and defeat you. And the Mandalorian's just like, yeah, I yield. And it's just sort of left, like, unresolved. And I think this is the very interesting thing with this episode, in that what happens next is insanely hype, amazing. I loved it. But it distracts you so much from this kind of plot premise. They never come back to it. And the episode does just end in midair without this actually getting any sort of resolution. So what's going on? But either way, we have this kind of unique situation where technically the rightful ruler of Mandalore right now is Din. So that's kind of a unique situation. I do wonder how they will explain the exact details of, like, but wait, didn't Sabine just give the Darksaber to Bo-Katan? Which is why she had it in the first place. And then it obviously suggests that Moff Gideon defeated Bo-Katan to gain the Darksaber back himself. And he seems reasonably skilled, but enough that, like, he could beat Bo-Katan. I'm kind of wondering exactly how that happened. I get the impression maybe it wasn't exactly like a direct one-on-one fight, and it was more of just, you know, he ended up kind of winning the day and claiming it that way. Again, it feels like there's a flashback that we have to see at some point, which could be very interesting to cover the exact details of the history here. Of, like, you know, the reason she doesn't have it is because she lost it. And if we're focusing very heavily on the sort of honorable way in which you claim the Darksaber and the title of leader, you know, he apparently did that correctly himself. And now she has to apparently do that with Din. But anyway, as Gideon realizes he's, you know, kind of created some rifts among our kind of hero characters, the other Dark Troopers come back because they were just blown out into space. They've returned because they can fly, and we get the kind of like the end is here. It's going to have to be some sort of a final stand. The impression you get is that like Din pretty much is the only one who can actually take these things out with his spear. How is this going to work? And it's just waiting for them to burst through the doors. They just start punching them. They're eventually going to get through, and then they just cut to suddenly there's one X-Wing. One X-Wing has arrived outside, and they're like, yay, it's going to save us all. And it's a joke, but it lands. They cut back later on, and suddenly like, wait, why have they stopped? And they cut to the monitors, and all the Dark Troopers in the corridors are looking at the person who's just arrived. It's a hooded figure, and you pretty much know immediately it's a Jedi. Lightsaber is activated. It slowly gets revealed, you know. It's a green lightsaber. You see the gloved hand. You see that it's Luke's lightsaber. Luke Skywalker has arrived on the scene. This, I guess, is who Grogu ended up contacting in one of the previous episodes. Such a cool moment. I did not expect this. If it was any Jedi, I was expecting it to be Ezra because they already name dropped Thrawn, and if Thrawn is sort of back in play, that would make sense that Ezra's also back in play. And I just didn't think in a show like The Mandalorian they would do what they did here, which is kind of use the sort of, you know, facial de-aging tech and have a Mark Hamill Luke Skywalker in the episode. But that's exactly what they did. The music sequence here, the way they did the choreography, and they just shot this of like everyone watching this happen, this unassailable situation for all of our characters here who have just, you know, pretty much outside of the Dark Troopers taken over an entire cruiser by themselves. Luke just comes in and just steamrolls the entire squad of Dark Troopers. This is the sort of thing we were kind of wanting from Luke Skywalker like the entire time. To finally see this character in his prime. That through the prequels we saw what Jedi Masters are capable of doing in the Clone Wars. Now, finally Luke gets his chance to do that in terms of well choreographed. And I think what stood out here was that this was definitely elements of, you know, the prequel lightsaber fighting. But it also felt slightly different in that I don't think we've ever seen a character use the Force as much in the middle of combat as Luke does during this sequence. And I think that's what made it feel so cool. And it almost felt like in the sequels that was something they just completely forgot about, was that the Jedi used the Force in the middle of combat too, whereas they almost felt separate in the sequels. So just seeing him transition from a kind of spin flourish with the lightsaber into a Force push, you know, sequence, push up against the wall, you know, slam against the wall. Really, really nicely done stuff. And as someone who's always looking out for the really nice lightsaber choreography, this hit all of the points that I wanted. And just, this is everything we didn't get it with Luke in the sequels, or to some degree even in the originals. And it was just such a fantastic moment to get this. It just felt like, oh, we just have to accept that the sequels, whatever they decided to do with Luke, is what they did with him. But this is much more like it. And of course it was, you know, Dave Filoni, Jon Favreau, their show that did Luke right. And so he comes in, and this is the answer to the question. Who is going to train Grogu? I think we all thought, oh, Cal Kestis, Ezra, or someone like that. Maybe Ahsoka will change her mind. But no, the almost like outside hope, even though it's the very obvious Jedi of this era, we just didn't expect that they'd do this. Luke is going to be the one to train him. And it gets across how important Grogu is. That, you know, it's not just that he's important to the Mandalorian and we care about him as a character, but that, no, the Empire wants him, but then this is also a member of Yoda's species, and they're connected to the Force, and Luke would care about that too, given his own connection to Yoda. So there's a significance here for Luke as well, and especially with the fact that, you know, he went to Tython to communicate with the Jedi, and Luke was the one he communicated with. That's a strong scene, and just what a moment. And we finally get to the, I suppose, the big emotional thing here of what is Grogu going to do? What does he want? And they do it all here, in that it's this confirmation where I guess on Tython, Grogu realized that for his path going forward, he does have to finish his training. So he is going to have to separate from Din, but like they say here, in the future, they will meet again. And I hope they stick to that. But I also think, in a way, you did have to do this. As much as I think everyone would have appreciated, like, 5, 6, 7 seasons of Grogu and the Mandalorian traveling together, Din's quest has fundamentally been about bringing him back to his people. And through the Ahsoka thing, through the Tython thing, his people are ultimately the Jedi. He was trained by them in the first place, and now he has to finish that training. So he can protect himself. That, imagine next time we see Grogu, he doesn't like collapse in a heap after using the Force a little bit. And he is more capable of using it more often, defending himself, and maybe communicating a bit better. It might mean we have a break of like maybe a season or two from Grogu and Din, the duo that has been this show for the first 2 seasons. But I think it's going to make it all the more powerful when they do maybe eventually reunite. That Grogu will be different, Din will be different, likely, having had this experience of bringing Grogu back. And then where does he go from here? Now that experience has changed him so much. And it was very strong of just, I liked the moment of just like, he doesn't want to go with you. And Luke is just like, he's looking for your permission. And he realizes he has to let him go. This is the thing he has to do. And he finally takes the helmet off and, I suppose, shows Grogu his face. This was probably the one thing I felt that they were going to do. The Mandalorian would show Grogu his face. I think regardless of what happened in the episode, that was where they were going with it. Especially after the way they talked about it and just handled him and his helmet in like the previous episode. Him taking it off to show Grogu, but then also him doing that in front of everyone else. In front of 2 other Mandalorians. In front of people who he is close to, like Cara, who likely hasn't seen his face before but now has. This isn't just one person who is going to keep it secret that they saw his face. He's now revealed it pretty much publicly. Not to mention, I guess his face is now in the Empire's network. So, can you have it more public than that? And this again is why the episode ending right in almost mid-air is so interesting, because you have to go back to Din to cover, just him and Mandalorians. How is his creed at this point? Is he going to put the helmet back on again? Because again, it was the thing that they said at the start. If you ever show your face to someone and take the helmet off, you can't put it back on. But he's right next to 2 Mandalorians who take their helmets off all the time and don't agree with that style of doing things. Is he going to learn from them and realize that my time with the children of the Watch Mandalorians was important, but I don't have to follow every single rule. I can take my helmet off if I want to, and show my face more, but the helmet's an important piece of battle equipment. He's going to wear it as we go forward. But we'll see how they approach that. Maybe we might see him unwilling to put it back on because he feels like he's gone against his creed, and there might have to be a big setup for the character to eventually putting it back on. But I think the end result of this probably is that we have him in a situation where he probably is more like Bo-Katan now and will take the helmet off when needed. So that was nice to see, and just you could see how emotional he was about having to let Grogu go, but this is what was needed. And Luke walks off with Grogu. He's accomplished his mission, and the episode just ends. And I think that's perhaps where the issue kind of comes in that the season ends, and there's no resolution about like, wait, what are we doing with the Darksaber? Like, are we not going to come back to the argument we were just having about the fact that Bo-Katan is meant to be the ruler of Mandalore, and she needs the Darksaber to represent that, but Din is the rightful owner of it, and that we potentially need to have a fight between these two characters? What's going to happen? In that, can you really cut away from this, have a side story with Boba Fett, and then come back and not immediately address what happens next? In that, I borderline feel that next season 3 of The Mandalorian, if they come back to a continuation, you pretty much have to start seconds after this season ends. In that, Luke exits, the X-Wing takes off, and then everyone's just like, oh yeah, we're on the cruiser. Darksaber, like, Gideon is there on the floor. What do we do? Where do we go from here? My guess would be that Din probably will help with whatever's going on with Mandalore. I guess he'll want to do something immediately following this, and why not learn more about the I suppose the actual potentially history of Mandalore, the real way of like normal Mandalorians. That could be an interesting path for the character as well. But I guess in the aftermath of this is probably where we get our setup for some of the other shows, like whatever range of the New Republic is going to be. We'll see what characters get involved in the Ahsoka show side of things. It's really hard to tell. But again, like, none of the like main cast died here. In that, I get the feeling like there's still probably way more with Moff Gideon to come. The fact that they did take some of his blood, and that blood is going to be used for something. So my guess is just that the amount of blood that they have, that's going to be what eventually leads to the whole Snoke Palpatine stuff going forward. Again, First Order stuff, I guess, is going to have to come into play at some point. But where do we go? Does Moff Gideon end up escaping? There's so many questions that are just like, in like the 5 minutes immediately following the end of this episode, what actually happens? That's why like the ending was kind of like, okay, if in your opinion the entire show was simply about Din's quest to bring Grogu back to his people, yes, the core plot of the show is over. But there's so much about Din as a character that I think they still have to come back to. There's so much with Grogu as a character they still have to come back to. Bo-Katan still has a lot of her character arc left open, and she right now doesn't appear to be tied to any of the other shows. But Din now is free to potentially join a show more focused about Mandalore specifically. But I suppose we have to discuss the after credits scene, which obviously Fennec Shand, I suppose Boba Fett comes back. Again, this is where it's even weirder, that like Fennec Shand is technically still in that scene with like everyone about the Darksaber. But then we cut past that to suddenly she's reunited with Boba Fett. They go to Tatooine and Jabba's palace, and there's big Bib Fortuna there, now the leader running Jabba's palace, and he just comes in, shoots everyone, shoots Bib, and he takes the throne on Tatooine there. So I guess he's going to be running the sort of the crime syndicate or whatever on Tatooine. He's going to be the new head of the Hutt clan, or whatever way they're going to frame it. And Fennec Shand is going to be his second in command here. So very interesting. And then they end with, coming December 2021, The Book of Boba Fett. That's all it is, just the title. The Book of Boba Fett, December 2021. So, sort of in almost the Mandalorian's release slot next year. In that, like, season 1 and 2 have both been, you know, sort of November, December, both years. This is specifically December next year. And it doesn't specify that that's season 3. But it is interesting that they put this on the end of season 2 of The Mandalorian. So it's obviously related in some way. But what does that mean for season 3? Are we getting season 3? I know some of the actors, I think, have talked about stuff of just like scripts have been written for The Mandalorian season 3 or whatever. I don't know what the full situation is. As far as I'm aware, I don't think there's been direct confirmation from like Star Wars officially about what's going on here. and a lot of the main entertainment websites have more been going off sort of speculation and what they think the situation is. The main thing is either, are they basically making season 3 of The Mandalorian now about Boba Fett, now that it seems like Din's story is over for the time being? Or is this a spin-off thing? And it's going to be like a Boba Fett miniseries that they're doing next year. But then, where does that put season 3 of The Mandalorian? In that there's clearly stuff still to cover with The Mandalorian, but does that just mean we're either delayed, or like, again, The Mandalorian typically comes out like in like October, November, not December launch. So is production going to be just like slightly delayed and they're putting this Boba Fett show first and it's maybe just offsetting where season 3 of The Mandalorian is going to be? I don't know. I think it would be very weird if we're just on a break from Din's story, given where everything wraps up here. I'm excited to see what they do with that Boba Fett show, because I like the idea of him sort of taking on a sort of leadership position here on Tatooine, and we're going to see what he does. That, like, he's sort of been maybe out of the game for a while. He's got his armor back. He's done the honorable thing to help the person who I suppose gave him his armor back. Now he can get to dealing with, what he hasn't been able to deal with in quite a while. That's kind of interesting to me as more of a, I suppose, what we're going to get with this show is maybe what we were potentially looking like we were going to get in episode 1 of The Mandalorian, before Din got distracted going after Grogu and his whole kind of destiny changed. Here, Mandalorian bounty hunter being a Mandalorian bounty hunter. That sounds pretty cool to me. But if we're replacing Din with Boba, I'm not sure how I feel about that, because I do care about the character. I want to see where these arcs go. And that's going to be weird, because if the decision, I suppose ultimately, if it's its own thing and it's an offshoot, that's fine. If it's replacing season 3, I think that's where the problems are going to come in. But that's where I'm going to wrap it up for now, because I don't want to speculate about something which I'm guessing they probably will move to clarify this as soon as they can. But as far as I can tell, as of the recording of this video, they haven't yet. It's still up in the air what the Book of Boba Fett really is. What I think also confuses that is that just last week they announced all the other shows and they didn't mention the Book of Boba Fett. Now, it might have been a spoiler for The Mandalorian. They didn't want to impact stuff that was so heavily directly related. Maybe now that season 2 is over, we know what characters like survive or involved or not. Maybe now they'll be a bit clearer and say that, like, okay, well, this character's going to be in this show. This is what this is. Hopefully we get some clarification. But there is my thoughts on the final episode of Season 2 of The Mandalorian. In the comments, let me know what your thoughts were, but that's been the video. Thanks for watching, and bye.